you've started it. Hello, everybody, and welcome to our webinar featuring Dr. Paul Cox, who will be receiving StockTrak's Distinguished Educator Award for his innovative use of StockTrak's virtual trading tools to better help his students with real-world portfolio management scenarios and to help giving them practical experience while preparing them for jobs in the financial services industry. My name's Thomas Reddy, and I'm the Director of Global Business Development here at StockTrak, and I'm thrilled to be welcoming our winner and honoree of this year's Distinguished Educator Award being presented to Dr. Paul Cox. Professor Cox is a leading lecturer and professor at the University of Bath, a city in the United Kingdom that's about 100 miles west of London. This $500 award will be presented annually to professors and instructors who have an innovative and transformative way to use StockTrak's financial education virtual trading tool to better equip students with the practical personal finance and investment skills that they'll need upon entering the job market and to better prepare them for life in general. Professor Cox, congratulations on winning StockTrak Distinguished Educator Award for 2024. This award celebrates your unique approach to financial education in such a way that it prepares students to be immediately effective in their careers upon graduation. Before we begin, a bit about our honoree, Dr. Paul Cox. Paul studied at the University of Liverpool, where he earned his bachelor's degree, and Exeter University, where he earned his doctorate and PhD. At Bath, Professor Cox teaches several courses entitled Investment and Trading, and a secondary course entitled Contemporary Issues in Financial Practice. Professor Cox has a considerable background in the financial markets and portfolio management areas, having worked at Kleinwort Benson, where he managed a $350 million emerging market equities fund. His public appointments include working for the government in the United Kingdom, particularly in the Department of Innovation and Skills, to produce a report on long-term metrics and models to assess company and investment performance, including the Department for Work and Pensions, where he worked to develop new money purchase pension plans for all workers in the United Kingdom. Paul has also contributed his academic expertise and investment laws for the country of Serbia to prepare it for the ascension into the European Union. Paul, that's an amazing work background that really highlights your financial markets experience and creates an opportunity for transformative experiential learning. Welcome to the webinar. Congratulations on winning this year's award. And let's get started. Congratulations, Paul. Professor Cox,
Thank you.
You're welcome. Professor Cox, maybe we can start about the University of Bath. Perhaps you can tell us about your students, who they are, what their majors are, and anything you think would be relevant to share with our audience of colleagues out there watching the webinar today.
Yeah, sure, Tom. Thank you very much indeed.
You're welcome.
So in the School of Management, which this is called, it may be akin to a business school, but in this particular instance, it's called the School of Management. I think partly because the subjects take us a little bit broader than a pure business school. So our undergraduates or our bachelor students will be taking a range of courses. Some of those electives will go into broader topics of management than a straight business school. What I'm teaching is final year undergraduate students, and one of the differentiators with these students are many are rolling off a year in industry. So when I say final year, oftentimes that means year 4 in this instance. And a point to note that has caught me out and now I've embedded into the program is just how advanced and transformative a year in industry is for those students. They come back so much more savvy about business and also investment. So folk like me need to incorporate that level of knowledge and those skills and competencies into the program. Those final year students are much more demanding, having had a year in industry.
See, how many students would be attending the University of Bath? And is it principally a business school, or are there other majors that the university?
Yeah, So the University of
Depend.
Bath started off as a technical university, so it's very applied, very practical and experiential. It doesn't do the whole range of subjects. Its specialism was engineering programs as means of going into the workplace and generating careers. So we're very light in the area of arts. We're very heavy on engineering. We're great in the sciences, and we have a very strong social sciences area. And in particular, the business school or school of management is leading in terms of the UK.
Thank you, Paul. I mean, one of the things that I was really excited about is working with you uh, through your fully branded platform, your global markets platform, and developing the investment trading platform that you're using to teach your students about the real world financial markets. And I think in my 19 years service here working at StockTrak, your portfolio management techniques and teaching style are really quite unique in that the theory of large numbers really plays a big part. Um, you have a pre-populated portfolio, and the pre-populated portfolio on StockTrak really means it's a feature that we have in StockTrak where the professor can predetermine what the securities that are being traded, what's the beginning cash balance, what's the composition of the portfolio, how many shares are assigned to each equity. And then at the beginning of the session, all of the students begin with the same portfolio. Typically, what we see in a normal investments class or in a portfolio management class is that most often the students are given anywhere from $100,000 to $1 million, and they're pretty much left on their own to supplement the course material with their own investment strategies. But I think what's really unique about your teaching style is that I think what you're doing is you're taking your previous work history, where you managed a $350 million investment fund, and you've applied that sort of psychology to your course. So what we see is you have a $1 billion pre-populated portfolio. That's an enormous amount of money. So when I look at the portfolio and when we structured it, I was struck by the composition, and it's very, very typical of what we see in sovereign funds. So when we're looking at an ETF or a world ETF, there's always a sort of concentration of the equities are bought, purchased, and set up in the portfolio. In your particular case, you've got a global portfolio from many different countries. So you've got England, you've got Germany, you've got France, you've got Asia as well. And what's really interesting about it is the weight. So I believe you've got 16 industries and about 80 securities, and then you weight the portfolio like 2% in consumer goods, 3% in consumer staples, and so on and so forth. So when I'm building my own portfolio or I'm managing my own financial affairs, or when we're watching sort of talking heads on financial television, they're always talking about the composition of the portfolio. So I was keenly struck about how you build that portfolio. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, thanks, Tom. So the pre-populated portfolio has worked really well for me. So to go right back to level set. So here in Europe, our outlook is very global. Whereas I understand that in the US, you have so many investment opportunities within your own jurisdiction that I think typically your investment thesis is one of being less global than we would be in Europe. So to start with, we're trying to invest globally. The place to go to for that naturally is the global market portfolio, which is straight from the textbook. However, of course, for students, the global market portfolio consists of many tens of thousands, millions of securities. That would overwhelm myself, let alone any student. So we need to have a way of compressing that global market portfolio. The way that Morgan Stanley and Dow Jones, S&P and FTSE do that is they produce indexes. And the pre-populated portfolio for me is a global index of manageable size for a student that takes a student straight to the global market portfolio. So it serves a wonderful initial purpose, the 1 billion starting portfolio for me mirrors, it gets us close to the actual real world. So in the investment desk where I might be sat in London in the city, and we may be managing more money than that, but we are, the units of interest are billions, not thousands or millions. And so it gets the students started around thinking about the right type of number of shares to buy or ETFs to buy, so that when that translates to the interview process later on, they really have an understanding about what order size actually looks and feels like. In addition, one of the great strengths of having a large portfolio is when we're managing that real money in the real world, we might see and read about wonderful opportunities in hydrogen cells or battery technology or tokenization, bitcoins, wave and tidal power. But the truth is, with the type of investment size that we have, those investments don't have the capacity or the liquidity to accept the kind of investments that we would need to make for that investment to be meaningful. And so students coming onto the course with wonderfully great ideas about small startups and small niche business ideas cannot implement those in public markets with medium to large size investment portfolios. And that's the real world. So it's really important that they understand that if they want to access those types of investments, then public markets are probably not the right way of doing that. And they may want to go and work for venture capital firms or private equity firms. So it helps bring the actual real world into the portfolio. So for those reasons, I'm a big fan of the pre-populated portfolio. In addition, it gives an index and a benchmark for the students. So if I was taking on a new investment mandate in the real world, that's likely to appear into my account as an in-specie transfer, not raw cash. So I inherit the departing fund manager's portfolio. So it's already invested in the pre-populated portfolio. My job is to apply my investment strategy, my added value process, to repurpose that portfolio to how I invest and create value for the client. So it is with the students. By inheriting a pre-populated portfolio, their job is then to repurpose that market portfolio in a way that will add value for the strategy that they devise. A zero weight in a pre-populated portfolio, it can be a huge bet to take. And that's something that they learn by already being invested in the security. To sell it entirely while the index still holds it at index weight is a big bet. And so they get to understand how to back the strength of their views, i.e. the conviction of their views, with differences to the actual index in terms of their investment weights. So I just see pre-populated portfolios as the go-to for me.
Paul, how did you arrive at the particular weights? Is that based on your years of experience working in the financial services industry? And because I noticed, and what we'll do is we'll make available your pre-populated portfolio for download. And I noticed that in this particular pre-populated portfolio, about 48%, if I'm not mistaken, or north of 40% anyway, is weighted in technology. But when I look at the actual securities, in there, it's not all NVIDIA, it's not all Microsoft, it's not all, Meta and so forth. It's quite diverse, and it's really across international borders and international markets. But generally, where did that sort of selection of securities and weightings, how did that all arrive? How did you think about that and presenting that to your students and not overwhelming them, right? Like, oh my God, it's $1 billion. The only stock I know is Apple. How did that all come about?
Sure thing, Tom. So my starting point here is, well, what's the Morgan Stanley World Equity Index look like? What's the S&P Global 1100 Index look like? And I broadly take those industry sector weights. So we know that the US is highly weighted. We also know that the technology sector is highly weighted. So I build in the actual real world equity market weights into the equity part of the portfolio. And then I'm going to be taking the largest stocks in those, which happen to be in the US, of course. However, we don't want to concentrate too much in the US. And so we also give some exposure to pharmaceuticals in Sweden and Norway. We also want to give some exposure to some really interesting new technology companies, which are large enough to be able to invest in, because our students are super interested in new environmental clean energy techniques. So we want to allow them to have some fun. We don't want it all to be old traditional companies that have been around a long time. But the aim is to replicate the sector weights that you will find in the Dow Jones, S&P Global, and then broadly have a 60% equity, 40% non-equity exposure in that multi-asset portfolio that adds to $1 billion. The 40% adding in corporate bonds, so that'll be investment grade, high yield. We've got commodities, we've got property, we've got sovereign bonds. That's how it comes about.
That's right. Can you talk a little bit about, you started using StockTrak's virtual trading tool in your classes, well over 2 years ago. So you had X number of students then. How has that, how has this pre-populated portfolio and the classes you teach, how has that transformed over the years that we've been collaborating together? And what's been the buzz and, let's say, the economic outcome for the students? Do you find that they're more job ready? Do you believe that this process ensures that the students are developing the skills that they need to hit the ground running? And how do you grade somebody on $1 billion portfolio? Obviously, the person with the most amount of money, is obvious, but there's 80 securities in there, let's say. And how does this all come together, Paul? And how has the impact been on your class size, you as a professor, and so on?
Yeah, thanks, Tom. Well, it's been a great honor to serve on this particular unit or course. So to start with, before we signed up with StockTrak, I was brand new at that point, so and I brought the StockTrak relationship together. So at the point I took over the program, at the point at which StockTrak was about to come on board, we had about 120 students in that program, which was regular across all the courses for final year, all elective in the University of Bath School of Management. Within my course, I then trailed massively the announcement that we were going to bring on StockTrak. This is what it was going to do for the course. This is how we were going to introduce experiential learning, how close to the live markets, how close to the real world investment desk trading and investment process we were going to get. Students, through word of mouth effects, enrolled in their hordes, and in that next year we jumped by almost 130 students. We now have on this course 360 students, which is close to double the numbers on the next course in our School of Management. So it's been an incredible journey that I've been on, and the word of mouth effects and the popularity of this course is unlike anything else within the school. And it all comes down to bringing experiential learning live in the market activity and as close to the investment desk as possible. When it comes to setting an assignment, so the students first of all have to create their own objectives within their student group, normally around 6 students. That's really key. One group may decide they want to have an index fund where they replicate the index, the pre-populated portfolio, with as few stocks as possible. So they want to minimize tracking error and copy the factors that are in the pre-populated portfolio. I help them do that. They may alternatively want to be active, which most do. And so they want to take investment bets one way or the other from that pre-populated portfolio. They create their objectives. That may be to exceed the performance of the pre-populated portfolio, to deliver the same performance with less standard deviation, or maybe higher standard deviation for higher performance. They may even have in some kind of an absolute return relative to cash or inflation. or even add in some responsible investment and sustainability criteria to say match the performance of the index, but with an improved risk metrics, MSCI, ESG rating on the portfolio. They set their objectives. They then devise their portfolio strategy, they implement the strategy, they risk manage it, they produce their own investment metrics that demonstrate their performance to their objectives against the pre-populated portfolio, write it all into a report. I judge their funds against their stated objectives, the process that they've gone through. And it's a balanced scorecard, which I believe Tom is going to put onto the StockTrak website. So I'm scoring students across a range of criteria for the investment purpose, objectives, strategy, their implementation, their active shares, tracking errors, performance, how they've done, and then at the end, their own opinion about how they've delivered and what they would do differently next time. They're very happy writing that report. It's a great fulfillment for the hard work they've done over the 11 weeks, and they go to a huge effort to illustrate that so professionally. So it looks and feels like an investment report with a great tear sheet up front.
Right. And what percentage of the grade would this experience be as, part of your class? Typically there's 100%, so it's pass fail, 50%, 20%, right? So, what percentage of the overall pass grade would this represent?
Okay, Tom. So this particular course has got 50% group assessed coursework, which is the investment report. So there's 50% of the investment grade. And then the final 50% comes through an individual exam. Now, what I do with the exam is I'm not testing anything outside of what they've learned within that experiential StockTrak's setting. So what the exam questions are very reflective. So how did you design an investment strategy? How did you construct the portfolio? What are the three greatest learnings that you took from that program? So the exam questions reflect the doing within the coursework. And that way, it's a good ready reckoner. So if a student was free riding within the group, that would shine a light. And I'd see that within the exam because they're unable to be as eloquent in their answer as a
Right.
fully participating student.
Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. It seems that your approach is not just academic, but it's a direct pathway to the job market. Have you gotten, I mean, have you had students come up to you and say, I'm going to work in financial services, right? Like you have a particular optic when you're coming into a class. And then, I've certainly had some professors in my academic life that have, changed the path of my career. Are students in your class coming back to you with feedback like that and saying, you've really changed the way I'm thinking about my career?
I have, Tom, and it's not just me that's involved here. One of the things I do is I have 3 or 4 investment strategists from the City of London come in and they give podcasts about latest economic conditions and market developments to help inform students about their portfolios and tactical asset allocation. Those podcasts are transformative too. So it really shines a light onto the investment sector and it makes many students want to go that way. Luckily, this particular course coincides with the big recruitment round that large investment firms will be making to get the next cohort of graduates graduating in June. And so my students will then be applying to go to assessment centres for interviews. And then also where there's things like digital technology being used at assessment centres where the employer is monitoring keystrokes and decisions made on investment, then my students are savvier in their interview questions. They stand out in the group work and their keystrokes are more attuned and show greater acumen than students who have not done this type of course. So we have so many students that send me messages to thank me for supporting them get a job, and they do see this as the differentiator between getting and not getting their first job offer in the investment sector. They're
That,
delighted.
that's amazing, Paul. And it's easy to see why you're StockTrak's Distinguished Educator for 2024. We'd love to have you here in the United States and coming to visit a number of conferences. I'm sure that other colleagues from many other institutions would like to hear you speak, and we have to work on getting you to a number of the conferences. Paul, we've got 5 minutes left. Would you mind taking a couple of questions from our audience at this point in time before we wrap up the webinar? Colleagues, if you would like to, thank you, Paul. Colleagues, if you have some questions for us, there is a chat feature in the platform, and we'd be happy to answer your questions at this time. Or if you prefer to email us your questions, we could forward them to Dr. Cox. He'd be happy to answer them. And what we're also going to do is we're going to upload the pre-populated portfolio that Dr. Cox actually puts forward to his students. We'll also include his course syllabus, and I think you'll also be wowed by his work. So if there's any questions, now's a great time to ask. Don't be shy. We're here to make your courses much better. Paul, there doesn't seem to be any questions at this point. Paul, all of us at StockTrak are really grateful for you sharing this knowledge with our community. I know that it's going to be helpful for other professors. You know, we're always talking to other faculty, especially when they onboard to StockTrak the first time, and they're asking, you know, how can I make the best use of this tool? How can I, improve my class? I think we have a hand up, Paul. Someone's raised their hand. Dava, go ahead. Please ask your question. Alana, could you help Dava answer or? Hey, Dava, we've enabled you to talk. Please go ahead.
Hey now.
How are you? Welcome.
Okay, how are you?
Good.
Sorry,
Yeah.
we're having some microphone issues. I'm based out of Kentucky. I'm at a private college, and we're in the process of developing investment-based courses under our finance area. I was wondering if you would be open to sharing your syllabi with us.
Yeah, for sure thing, Dava. I've got no reason not to, and I'll do that via StockTrak. I will just have a quick look and just edit it so that it's fresh for this particular incoming semester in 3 weeks' time. I'll give that to Tom to upload.
Great. Thank you so much, Paul.
Thank
No
you,
problem.
Dava, for your question. We're still live. We can still take a question or two.
There is a question in the chat.
Okay. Could you please read the question, Alana?
Sure. So the question says, do you mean you don't test students by dishing out weekly homework assignments to test understanding of concepts?
That's a great question. And no, I don't. I have a very large class size. There's no requirement for us to do that in the university. And I think in truth, in the UK higher education sector, that's not such common practice over here. So no, there's nothing like that. It's just the end of course assessments.
Thank you, Paul. We still have a little bit of time left. There's time for one more question. Well, I've got a question. Paul, when are you coming to the United States to spend some time with us and work with us on the lecture tour?
Well, I think I could do something in 2025. I'd be pretty flexible for the spring. That would be a great pleasure to perhaps go and meet a few colleagues at universities in the US and perhaps even in Canada. So yeah, I'm very open to invites. I'm always interested in collaborating and sharing. So it would be my pleasure.
I know you'll be presenting in Spain. Am I correct? You'll be presenting your paper in Spain. Perhaps you can in the last minute that we have, talk about that, talk about the conference, and talk about your paper. And we'd also like your permission to make that available to our colleagues.
Yeah, sure, Tom. So this is we're in the UK and in Europe, we're very interested in the kind of so what behind introducing innovations in teaching, scholarship, experiential learning. What does it do to the student, rather than just doing it because we're kind of the university is encouraging us to. So what I've done is I've run an awful lot of comparative results against other courses to find out, well, what happened to student grades on this particular course that this topic is about versus other courses. What's happened to the top end of the grades, the lower end of the grades? What kind of distribution of marks do we have? What kind of employability statistics do we see at the end of that? So I've done a lot of work, and the results are really interesting, and I'll be presenting those in Spain, where say we're very interested in those types of so what type of analysis.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you so very much for making yourself available to us. All of our colleagues here at StockTrak, thank you. Thank you for the amazing work that you're doing using StockTrak. And again, congratulations on this year's StockTrak Distinguished Educator Award. We look forward to collaborating with you, and we thank you so very much for the time that you've given us today. Thank you, Dr. Cox.
And thank you, and thank you to everybody on the line. It's a great pleasure to be here with you.
Thank you. This concludes our webinar today with Dr. Paul Cox. We hope to see you next time on another educational webinar that we have planned. Thank you so very much to everybody.